Hello, BookTube. The long list for the 2018 Man Booker Prize has been announced, and I thought we'd go through it together, and I would give you a few of the details on it, and then natter a bit. It seems only expected if you have a BookTube channel and you are, as I am, deeply concerned with the world of new releases, to at least do a video on one of the most prestigious prizes of the year. So I want to go over it first with you. The long list is 12 books and 1 comic book. And the judges are Kwame Anthony Appiah, who is a philosopher, Val McDermid, who's a thriller writer, Leo Robson, who's a cultural critic, Jacqueline Rose, who's a feminist writer and critic, and Leanne Shapton, who's a graphic novel artist. And the books on the long list are as follows. Snap by Belinda Bauer, Milkman by Anna Burns, Washington Black by Essie Ejigan, In Our Mad and Furious City by Guy Gunaratne, Everything Under by Daisy Johnson, The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner, The Water Cure by Sophie McIntosh, Warlight by Michael Ondaatje, The Overstory by Richard Powers, The Long Take by Robin Robertson, Normal People by Sally Rooney, and From a Low and Quiet Sea by Donal Ryan. And when we're talking about a major award like this, a huge amount of money in the prize, a huge amount of attention from the press, a huge amount of money behind the scenes with a new sponsor, it's important, I think, to keep in mind that the comments made by the judges to the press after the long list is announced will be entirely lies. And they'll be, because we live in the 21st century, because that's the nature of the time we live in, they'll not just be lies, they'll be self-evident lies. They'll be lies that you can simply look at them and see that they're not true. You don't need to research at all. Like, for instance, in the case of this particular long list, the judges have been going to the press and saying this is the arrangement, the wide variety was totally random. It was the fact that out of 12 books, 4 are debuts. 1/3 of the list is debut novels, the very first time the author has ever written anything. It was all just wacky random chance. We didn't plan any of this. One judge said, I read these things on my iPad. I had no way of knowing what they were. Comments like that are, to put it mildly, belied by the fact that in a year in which there's a thriller writer on the panel of judges, a thriller novel is on the long list. That on the year when there's a graphic novelist on the panel of judges is the very first year when a graphic novel, a comic book, is on the long list. Those things aren't coincidences. That's not, oh my gosh, what an amazing thing. How lucky that we have a comic book on the long list and a comic book artist as the judge. No, those aren't coincidences. Those are behind the scenes demands being met. Those are mini hostage situations that were resolved to the detriment of the prize rather than to the outrage of the prize giver. So you have to keep that in mind. The judges have come forward and said, we read 80 million books. We had no plan. We didn't coordinate anything. All the results are random. Isn't this wonderful? And none of that is true. This list is clearly sending some messages, I think. And the messages revolve around the second thing to keep in mind with literary prizes, or really prizes of any kind, which is that prizes are given for 2 reasons. They're given for doing, and they're given for being. And, a good Irish Roman Catholic that I am, I say that all prizes given for being are fraudulent. They are vanity. Prizes should only be given for doing, and doing better than anybody. That's the whole point of a prize. But I don't think a lot of that went on with the selection of the Booker long list. I think there's an enormous amount of prize giving for being here instead of doing. We live, after all, in the age of participation trophies. We live in the age of constant emotional validation. We live in the age where anything that is established is probably wrong. And you just leave it to the experts to tell you that. They're not going to ask you. They're not going to question it. They're just going to tell you that anything that's established is probably wrong, and probably evil on top of that. And the Booker long list this year compounds insult with injury, because this time you're not even being told that by experts. As you can tell from the judge list that I just read off, this is by far the least literary panel of judges that has ever sat on a Booker Prize. In fact, so non-literary where Val McDermid writes thrillers that are constricted by genre. There's nothing wrong with that. You all know that. I love genre fiction. But it is constricted. A chunk of it is out of the writer's hands. So, although it's snobbish to say that people shouldn't read thrillers or genre fiction of any kind, it isn't snobbish to say that such writing is limited. The limits are part of the appeal, right? It's insane to say that you're being snobbish or condescending to say that a thriller has a certain form and can't be just anything that its author's muse wants it to be. That's not snobbish to say. And I might point out, there are ample prizes already out there for thrillers, for genre fiction, and also for comic books. To say that a comic book can be literature in the same sense that even Michael Ondaatje, an author I don't particularly like, but to say that a comic book can be literature in the same way that he can, is another thing that one of the judges said. That they picked a graphic novel for the first time in Booker history because it does everything that a good story does. When that's no defense. That's no explanation of anything. There are plenty of things that do things a good story should do. A nightclub comedian, in the warm-up to his act in the Poconos, will do things that a good storyteller should do. Is he up for a Booker? It isn't so far as collected restaurant receipts or an electronic billboard or the transcript of a podcast, but still, it points the arrow in the direction of this abysmally stupid century to a time when those things won't be ruled out either. I'm sure that Sabrina is very good. I've looked at some of its pages. It is written in the telegraphic style that you absolutely need to do if your pages are broken up into visual panels. And the artwork is, to put it mildly, not my cup of tea. I don't see it. It's now in the record books as a Man Booker nominee, even if it doesn't win. And the fact that a comic book got nominated, and the fact that 1/3 of the list here is debut novels, is meant to say something. Because what the judge's comments after the fact that this is all just random, there was no premeditation, is a lie. And if it is a lie, then that means that the truth is that there was premeditation and there is a goal in mind. There is a point being made here. And I think I know what that point is. It's a stiffly upthrust middle finger at the literary establishment. Because if you have 4 debut novels, if 1/3 of your list for the Man Booker Longlist is debut novels, then what are you saying? What's the unavoidable implication of those inclusions? That the debut novels on this list, the very first time the author wrote a novel, is better than works by Ali Smith, Alan Hollinghurst, Will Self? that what we want here, we're going to say that it's random. We're going to say that we just read everything and this is the way the chips fell. But what we really want is to change the brand of the Man Booker, to burnish it a little, to pitch it a little for a younger audience, and maybe a non-literary audience. Since I think on the judges panel, Val McDermid writes thrillers. I think that Jacqueline Rose has written a novel, but it wasn't meant to entertain. It was meant to make a point. I think it was a feminist revision of In Search of Lost Time by Proust. So, upending norms, but not the journey that we want novelists to take us on. Instead, it was a classroom lecture in the form of a novel. And other than that, I don't think it's wrong at all to comfortably assume that this is a Man Booker judging panel consisting of people who do not read contemporary fiction. One way or another, whether you can assume that or not, you would have to, if you assume they do read contemporary fiction, you would have to assume it in spite of their official biographies rather than because of them. And that's a weird, to put it mildly, way to set up a judging panel for one of the primary literary awards of the entire year. Would you want that in the judging panel of something else, of anything else? Would you want to run down the judging panel and then step back and say, well, okay, it doesn't look like they have any personal familiarity with what they're judging, but I'm sure it'll all work out. On this list, discounting the comic book, which I am just going to do. I am sure that collected tweets or flash fiction will be on a Booker long list in my lifetime now, but for the moment I'm going to ignore the comic book and just concentrate on the 6 books. Of the 6 books, I have read 6. Of the long list, I have read 6 of the books. I've read In Our Mad and Furious City, which intrigued me so much that I requested a transatlantic copy. I almost never do that, and I liked it. I liked it just fine. It's a debut, and boy oh boy does it show it. The whole point of debut fiction is that these authors have not learned their craft sufficiently to buff out the rough spots and make the books better. There are mistakes that happen in Our Mad and Furious. It's a very good book. It's very strong, very fierce. But there are mistakes that happen in it that Ali Smith doesn't make anymore. Ali Smith, who is not up for consideration. She's not on the long list. Her latest novel was not as good, according to these judges, as 4 first-time efforts. But anyway, I read that one. I read The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner, which was very, very bad. I really feel sorry for the many people out there who take reading advice from major literary awards. I know some people like that, who will look at the Booker long list and say, okay, well, I'm going to order these books then. I now know that these things have the seal of approval. These will be good. Some of those people have, over the years, and a couple over the many decades, learned to supplement that instinct by also checking with me and maybe a couple of other people, a couple of other dyed-in-the-wool readers. I guarantee you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I read more contemporary fiction than any of these judges or all of them put together. And so some of those people actually check with me. But it makes me sad to think of all the people out there who aren't going to check with anybody, are just going to read The Mars Room and think, they're going to think less of the man Booker. That's the way transference works. They're not going to think, well, gee, how did this get on the list? They're going to think, boy, anything can get on the list. And the man Booker hasn't done a lot to dispel that, and we're living in a world without the Nobel, and for the same reason. So anyway, I've also read The Water Cure by Sophie McCormick, which is it's dystopian and man-hating, and even so, I thought it had stretches that were very, very good. The American edition, I don't think, comes out until the fall, so it could be that we'll be getting a copy on this channel right around the time when the shortlist and the winner are being announced. I've also read Warlight by Michael Ondaatje. This is, as I said, not an author that I particularly like. Warlight I actually liked more than anything else I've ever read by him, but solely because it was less quote-unquote artsy than anything else he's ever done. I talked to 2 or 3 other book critics that I know, and we all said the same thing. We were all comparing notes and saying, boy, it didn't read like Michael Ondaatje at all. It read like just a four-square, predictable novel with almost none of his signature, they all said his signature strengths. I would say his signature wool gathering and flapdoodle, one way or another. It's strange that it would get on there, that it would get on the long list, even though it is, I don't think, typical for this author at all. I read The Overstory by Richard Powers. I have no idea why it's on this list. I guess it's long and very ambitious by a blindingly talented writer. Maybe it's just me. I have mentioned on this channel before, I am struggling with that book still. I wrote a review of it months ago. I've read it twice, and I do not understand a lot about it. Either it is a flight of genius on the author's part that maybe he's been inspired to do by recent trips to, the Pacific Northwest and the deep sequoia forest, or it's silly, or it's just a half-baked thing. I can't decide which it is. Ordinarily, I would have no trouble deciding which it is. If it's a book entirely full of holier-than-thou environmentalists and talking trees, I would pretty much plunk for a silly book right away, but it had molten fire throughout it, and I don't know. I'll get the paperback, and I will read it again. I will grapple with this book until I know what to think of it, and maybe I never will. Maybe that's the good thing. And then the last one was From a Low and Quiet Sea by Donal Ryan, which I thought was brilliant. And since I think the point of this long list, and by extension this Man Booker, the 2018 Man Booker, is to dethrone the establishment. Since I think that's the point, a stupid, stupid thing for a literary prize to even think about doing, or even think is necessary to do, much less squander its capital doing. But since I think that's the point of the 2018 Man Booker, I'd be very surprised if Ondaatje or Richard Powers won. Even though the two books are worthwhile. But Donal Ryan I could see winning. Not only because his book is brilliant, but also because there was a recent controversy about Irish books being admissible in the Booker at all, and it might be that and the combination of the book's brilliance might make it win. I don't know. I'm not as brave as somebody like Eric Carl Anderson who makes long predictions. This time I don't really know. I'm assuming, like I said, I'm assuming that this Man Booker is rewarding things for being rather than for doing. I'm assuming that it is trying to make a point that has nothing to do with the quality of literature. So, by extension, I'm assuming that a debut will win. Just to show, we're not in anybody's pocket. So what if Alan Hollinghurst's been doing this for 40 years? So what? Doesn't mean that these 4 debuts can't be better than his latest book. Of course, the quintessence of that point, if I'm right, would be that the comic book would win. We shall see. We shall see. The tea leaves will be much clearer in late October when the shortlist is announced. Then we'll be able to see much clearer if I'm right about what I think is the philosophy behind these allegedly random picks. And then the winner is announced. When was it? The date I have here? Oh no, the shortlist is the 20th of September, and the winner is announced on 16 October. So we'll know then. But for now, I've read only 6 out of 12 books on the long list, and ordinarily that would make me think, well, geez, I'd better hurry up and read the others. But not in this case. Not in this case. I think it's fairly obvious in this case that there was a rationale for picking these books that was not literary, and that makes me think, well, okay, if I'm right about that, then these picks can't be trusted anyway. I mean, they couldn't really be trusted even without such considerations, because these are the picks of a panel of judges that don't know what they're talking about, that literally don't know what they're judging. But even so, even if by some freak of chance they got lucky and picked 12 really good books, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, for all the others, for Snap and Milkman and Washington Black and Everything Under, and The Long Take and Normal People, I will simply wait. And if the books come to me in the course of events, I will read them and see what they're all about. But in this particular case, this is one of the first bookers in which I'm not going to rush out and try and rectify these gaps in my long list reading. So there you go. Those are my thoughts about the Man Booker long list for 2018. I'm sure there'll be other BookTube videos. We have a handful of really, really good BookTubers, really different opinions. We have a handful of people who do weigh in on these things. I've noticed a few people on a few channels saying that the BookTube community just in general is sort of prized out, sort of weary of literary prizes. I guess I sort of see that. I myself love the hubbub around literary prizes, because whether I agree with the long list or not, in this case obviously I don't, I love the fact that it gets people talking about books. I absolutely love that. And with something like the Man Booker, it gets lots and lots of people who don't actively read talking about books, which is even better. But even so, there'll be plenty of videos, and I'll be watching them all eagerly. I'd love to know what you think of this list. It was largely frustrating for yours truly. Even though there's some books on here that I've read and liked, there's no home run on here. The Donal Ryan maybe is the closest thing, but the half a dozen truly brilliant novels that were overlooked for this long list, they're the things I'm thinking about today. maybe in a week I'll think differently. But one way or another, I'm gonna wrap this up for now. But I'll be back Thank you, BookTube.